Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dodgy Punts AFL podcast, just the tips edition. We teased it on the main episode, and now we have gone. I can't say what I was going to say because we'll be cancelled on the first episode. Football's deep into the next round of footy tipping, Liam. How are you?
Very well. I'm all the better after that little innuendo there, Jesse. It was very delightful. Well done. Well played.
I went between the thought of can't be cancelled 17 seconds in to the new spin-off show, and then thought it's a spin-off show. Doesn't matter, even though it shares the same name. It doesn't actually matter that much. As we teased on the main show, this is our pocket preview edition of the round ahead, where we give you our tips, we give you our thoughts, and it's a very, very imminent round, Liam, round 7, because we're starting on a Wednesday.
Starting on a Wednesday.
Who would have multiple days off from football in a row? Not me.
Look, not me, mate. If it's anything like the NBA and we can have 3 games a day for the entire week, I'd be happy, right? We've got enough teams for that, surely. This game's not taxing enough on the body. Stuff it. Get them in there. Get them going. Get them on the field. Wednesday night footy. Look, I don't usually do much else on a Wednesday, so I'm not too upset by it, Jesse. I'm not too upset by it. But these rounds where the games are spread across, 4 or 5 days instead of just the 3 or 4, makes it a little bit easier to digest sometimes. That's all I'll say about that. I don't mind it so much myself.
I agree. I do think you run the risk of footy fatigue, especially if the 2 Sunday games are awful, or the first game of the round is awful, which I think may apply here to an extent. I get why we have to spread it out. We made our thoughts clear, I think, on the whole ANZAC round concept on the main show when we recorded that.
You made your points clear. I just joined along. You were very, very passionate about it. That's what I do. You don't sit on the fence, Jesse. That's what I appreciate about you. Easy for me to say is you pick a side and you stick by your convictions. I like that about you, Jesse.
My fence is electrified. Don't lick the electric fence. Never ends well. So make sure you are following us on all of our social media. YouTube, this is the only place you can see this. So if you're not on YouTube, you're not seeing this. It's that simple. Welcome
YouTube
to 2003.
Exclusive. That's right.
You can also follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on the other podcasting platforms if you wish. I suppose we can caveat this as well by saying that this week's Dodgy Punts AFL podcast main show is an audio-only special. Special would be generous, I think. It's fair to say it wasn't by design, but you know what? That's the beauty of technology. So
the word you're looking for, Jesse, is exclusive. It's an audio exclusive.
It is
Just
an audio
the Tips
exclusive.
Episode is a YouTube exclusive. That's, use the buzzwords, get people excited, And speaking of excited, Jesse, are you excited for this round of footy? Yes or no?
Kind of. Yes, no, I am. I'm always excited for footy. I think there's some very good games in this round. I'm probably less excited for my own team than I am for some other teams this round. Not particularly excited for Wednesday. I'm gonna be honest, and maybe that makes me sound like a grumpy old man, but I could live without Wednesday's game. Although I will say this: Thursday, couple of really good games. Saturday, some very good games. That covers me. Don't need to talk about Friday. Oh, Sunday's okay.
Sunday's there as well. I think some exciting stuff to come out of Sunday. We'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, I think it's. I think last week we expected a litany of good games because of the teams that were playing each other, and it didn't quite deliver on that. So maybe this week, where the games we're maybe not as exciting about, it was a bit of a flop. Some games that we're not maybe as excited about might deliver in spades, Jesse. We will see. But we are here to tip. At the moment for the tipping competition this year, Jesse currently sitting at 36 after his 5 tips right last week, taking the lead off of me on 34 with my dismal 2 from last week. Holy moly, I need to get a couple back. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go down just to make sure it's nice and fair. We're going to alternate our tips, so neither of us can get, play defensive as you might want to do. And as you mentioned in the main podcast, we're not going to do that.
Yes.
So we're going to go one by one.
I will defend it, and my tips will play their roles individually. And I will get an extra year on my contract for that reason alone.
Justin Longmuir, there is no escape from Jesse's wrath at all. But that's how we're going to do it. We'll go through the games, give a bit of a rundown, and look, we're just a couple of Joe Schmoes. We like a good tip. We like a dodgy punt, just like you. So hopefully we can give you some sort of something to think about as we roll into round number 7. Jesse, do you want to read the games out? Shall I read the games out? What would you like to do?
I can read the games out. I feel like
No,
that's
read the
something,
games out. Go on.
that's
Why not?
very tradesman-like performance. You can call me, Troy Makepeace, Robbie Hadrill, just that utility defender that you have to have. So we'll start with Wednesday because that's how the week
Good place
works.
to start. Yeah.
7:25 p.m. local time at the MCG in Melbourne. I hope this is well attended because it's the right time slot for it, night before a public holiday. Richmond, 16th place Richmond taking on 6th place Melbourne. This should be an interesting game, I think. Liam, you can kick us off with the tips if you'd like. Who would you like to tip in this game and why?
See, this is the thing, right? Like Richmond, it's weird. I feel like I haven't seen much of Richmond this year. I'm not too sure if that's because they haven't been playing very well, if it's because they had the bye last week. I just feel like I haven't had a consistent understanding of Richmond. I've got a pretty good understanding of all the other teams. Richmond, it's still a big old question mark, so I'm not entirely sure what team is going to show up this week against Melbourne. But that said, Melbourne should win, but I am still not entirely sure how it's going to play out. But I think just from obviously ladder position on itself, the teams themselves, how they're playing at the moment, Melbourne should get the win. So I'll tip them, and I'll tip them by, I don't know, let's say 18 points, 3 goals. Jesse, what say you?
I'm tipping Melbourne as well because I agree in many of the ways that you've articulated, Liam. I think they should win. I have watched a bit more of Richmond than perhaps you have, as you've admitted here. What I will say is I think Richmond are markedly a better side at the G. It's like our age-old question, if a kahumba falls in the forest, how many goals did Geelong get out of that? We said 4 for that. I think it's actually, I'm going to do this a different way. I think it's about 3 goals less for their opposition. Because I don't think Richmond are a particularly high-scoring team with their current forward line. But I do think they're generally a pretty well-organised defensive team, especially at the MCG, which they play quite well. Melbourne haven't really sexied me up in terms of their goal scoring this season. So this strikes me as a winnable game for Richmond. I do think Melbourne will have enough, but I think there are bigger boilovers in this round than Richmond turning over Melbourne on Wednesday night.
Fair enough. Melbourne for both of us. Jesse, who we got next?
We have, I think, the game of the round. And, regardless of where these two teams are on the ladder, it's just about always going to be game of the round unless you happen to run into some freak generational Friday night clash a la Geelong St Kilda in 2009. Much after Anzac Day when they were about 10-0. But that type of freak generational game that you only get, once every 20 years. But it is Essendon versus Collingwood on Anzac Day, 3:20 p.m. bounce down local time at the MCG. This is never a particularly easy game to tip, and I get the toss here. I'm landing on a Magpie here. I think they're just starting to hit their straps. Essendon have potentially been one of the clubs that have exceeded my expectations so far in season 2024. And I don't think this is going to be a flogging. But what we saw from Collingwood against Port Adelaide last week was a return to their form. And I think pound for pound, if you line these two sides up, Collingwood should have enough. Now, that doesn't take into account the fact that this will be a 95,000 capacity MCG crowd. It's always a ferocious crowd. It's a passionate crowd. It's a high-pressure game from the word go. Those games can make very strange things happen. We've seen it with David Zaharakis, Jared Blair. There's countless moments. Mark McGough terrorising Essendon circa about 2002 as well. Plenty can happen in Anzac Day games, but I think the story of 2024 will be the Magpies continuing to just start to build. I think this would be 3 wins in a row for them if they get the job done here, Liam. They just seem to be now starting to hit their gears.
Yeah, look, copy and paste all of that. Like, it is Anzac Day, and I think I said this on the main pod as well. Like, you never know what's going to happen on Anzac Day. Like, it's one of those games where you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who Essendon has beaten above them on the ladder this year. I feel like most of their wins have come from people below them on the ladder. I feel Collingwood are just, like you said, hitting their straps right about now. And so, yes, my tip is going towards the Pies as well. Let's move on.
that's not the only game at ANZAC Day, and this is probably a
No.
conversation for another segment. But we have at Monica Oval on Thursday night, we have third place GWS taking on 12th place Brisbane Lions. Liam, you get the toss here. Who are you tipping in? I think probably at the start of the season would have been considered a blockbuster game, but there's potentially a shade of gloss off it 6 rounds into the season.
Yeah, Brisbane would want to win this if they want to keep their season alive. It's pretty simple. It's as simple as that. If they want to be taken as serious contenders, they have to. GWS, the last few weeks, I've been a bit worried about their lack of ability to finish out games with the pace they start the game with, which could come up back to haunt them. I still keep waiting for Brisbane to kind of go the same as Collingwood have done over the last few weeks and actually realise who they are. And it doesn't seem to be coming. So Monica is not exactly a fortress for GWS. But that said, I'm still going to back them in. I'm still going to back the Giants in to add on to Brisbane's woes. That said, I can easily just as easily see Brisbane turning it on, and finally playing some footy that we know that they can.
I think, as you correctly pointed out, Liam, they'd want to win this because a loss here, which for the record I think will happen, I'm tipping GWS, is going to cause massive problems within the Brisbane Football Club if they don't leave Canberra with 4 points. They are not in a good position before a ball is bounced in round 7. If they lose, that position is demonstrably worse. They're in trouble, and I sense that this is only going to compound. GWS, I've said this before, and it hasn't quite worked out, a la when they played St Kilda a couple of weeks ago. I think this has the potential to be quite a poor result for Brisbane if GWS get a hold of them, because GWS can get a hold of teams at Monica. I know you said it's not a fortress team, and you're right, but when they play this ground well, they play this ground very, very well. So GWS, I'm fairly confident they get the job done here. This will be one of the, I feel like, the more safer tips this round. I'm pretty cold on, on Brisbane, which is ironic because Canberra's freezing all the time.
Have lived there, can confirm. 2-5 wouldn't be a great start, but we'll move on. Well,
it's good. It's good for your diet.
It is true.
Always caveat with that. There's a fun fact for you, actually. One of the main races in WA was named the Fruit and Veg Stakes for a few years because of the sponsorship with Go 2-5. So the iconic Northerly, who the race is now named after, that being the Northerly Stakes, won the world famous Group 1 Fruit and Veg Stakes in 2002, and that is very funny.
Fruit and Veg Stakes. Yes. Oh goodness! But that completes the diet. Really.
Steaks, not steaks.
Yeah. I know.
Steaks, not steaks.
Next game.
That's a good name for a really shit indie pop band, actually. Steaks, not steaks.
Steaks, not steaks. Okay, well, you can start that band. Let me know how it goes.
Now selling out the Bayswater Town Hall on Friday night in competition with Port Adelaide versus St Kilda at Adelaide Oval. This is just a formality. I get to tip first here, don't I? Great. Well, 2 words, Port Adelaide. Your turn.
Yeah, Port Adelaide. Moving on.
That was so fast. On a Saturday morning, we have our official death slot game of the round, and this really is prime moments death slot. Kelly's got her passport out to go down to Tasmania. It is North Melbourne versus the Adelaide Crows on Saturday morning for Perth, early afternoon for our Eastern Seaboard listeners and viewers. Liam, this is a game that both teams are going to be pretty desperate to win because, and we didn't actually say this when we first recorded this, bit of inside baseball there. This is take 2. But the North Melbourne fan base seems to have really noticeably turned after that Hawthorn loss, and they are copping a hammering in the media. So the Shinboners will be desperate to reunite that spirit, but can they do it, Liam, against an Adelaide team that also now needs to start picking up points more often than not?
No wins versus 1 win. It's not exactly an easy call, regardless of North Melbourne's obvious form and limitations. I'm too down on you, Jesse. Do I dare? Do I dare take a bit of a swing here? Because Adelaide haven't been blowing me out of the water either, but they are the better team. No.
Adelaide were awful at Optus. Remember how bad they were here?
I do remember that. I do remember that when Freo were playing the footy that they stopped playing for some reason after round 3. Let me think.
Don't remind me. This will turn into an hour-long web exclusive or YouTube exclusive.
We don't want that. We wanted to keep it at 15. We're already there. Let's go. No, I'll stick with Adelaide. Adelaide should win, and Adelaide should get the points here. I don't know if North are going to win this year, and if they get up over Adelaide, then holy moly, we got some trouble. We got some trouble in Adelaide.
Yeah, for a team that should have been playing finals, I'd absolutely agree, Liam. But I'm tipping Adelaide purely for the reason that, much like Collingwood, pound for pound, they are the better side than North Melbourne. The Tasmania question does bring it a little bit in. Does that help North? I think potentially, but I don't think North are really in a position to help themselves. To be completely honest with you, Liam, at the moment, they're not giving me a lot to be enthusiastic about, which is a far cry from this time a month ago when I was actually, getting quite bullish about what we were seeing with North, but geez, some cold water's been poured on that, much like that water in the Bass Strait. So Adelaide for me, and we are going to move swiftly on to what, if it wasn't for Collingwood, Essendon, Liam, I think would be the game of the round, and it's in almost a bit of a death lot too. Geelong versus Carlton at the MCG, 4:30 p.m. bounce time in local time zones. I'm tipping first here, aren't I, Liam?
You are indeed, so yes.
I'm tipping, despite the fact that Carlton play the MCG very well, despite the fact that Carlton seem to have an allergic reaction to losing close games, which this probably will be, I like Geelong. And while there will be commentary about the Kahumba, Forest, etc., not playing there, I think something that gets lost in that debate is the fact that they do play the G very well. And there is enough experience in this team to negate having to play an hour up the road. So I'm tipping Geelong. I acknowledge they have to lose at some point, and this is probably their biggest fork in the road. I know people said Brisbane in Brisbane. That was never going to be a loss for Geelong. Brisbane are finished.
Yeah, I said that. Oops.
That's okay. That's why you're on here, to make me look better. So I'm going with Geelong. I think they're probably too strong the way they're going, and I'm happy to back a team that's in form. Liam, are you joining me on the V-Line Express from Geelong to Melbourne and back, or are you going into Lygon Street for a nice Carlton cappuccino?
I am heading to a Lygon Street, my friend, for that cappuccino, maybe a cheeky pasta. Who knows? I think that Carlton have enough to get over Geelong here. I think that it will be their first loss of the season. We'll have no more undefeated teams come the end of the round. I think Geelong still undefeated. They're playing very good, very wonderful footy. But I still think Carlton's the more complete team. And if Carlton, as a complete team, can string everything together just so, then they should take care of the Cats, I would say. So I think it's going to be a cracker. I think it's going to be an absolute blaster of a match. But Carlton for me, and honestly, if I'm going to try and get one back on you, this seems like a good time to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. No Saturday night game, which is a shame. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock local time.
Jesse, go back. I know you're doing. I know what you're doing.
Do I have to?
Come on, mate. Yes, we have to. We have to do it. Yes.
Okay.
Go on.
At 5:30 p.m. local time at Optus Stadium, it is the Fremantle Football Club versus the Western Bulldogs Football Club. Oh, you get to go first here, Liam. Who are you tipping and why? Don't say what I think you're going to say, lest I make fun of you.
That's fine. You can make fun of me. It's okay. Good things come in threes, Jesse. And so do bad things. We've had our 3 good ones. We've had our 3 bad ones. It's time for 3 good ones. Let's get it back on board. Come on, boys. Let's do it. Look, last week was one of the most disappointing experiences as a Freo fan in my existence. We discussed this on the podcast. It was horrendous. It was horrible. Put it this way. I'm going to tip Freo. And if I see the same thing that I saw against the Eagles this week against the Bulldogs, I shan't be tipping them again for the rest of the season. It's going to be very hard for me to actually put any sort of weight on them being a serious contender if they do not change their ways. And I shall leave it there, Jesse.
Yes. Less than a week ago, Liam, you watched Luke Beveridge absolutely dismantle a Ross Lyon coach side. Now,
Ross Lyon?
Ross Lyon is Coca-Cola. Okay.
He is. Okay.
Justin Longmuir is LA Ice. He is the budget, discount, clearance brand of defensive football, and you're telling me that he's going to be able to magically beat a team that just tore apart the superior version of him?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
also, I also want to point out, you and the bookmakers actually agree here that Fremantle are going to be winning this game. $1.77 to $2.10. Now, we encourage responsible gambling on the Dodgy Punts AFL podcast and on Dodgy Punts Just the Tips, a spin-off series. However, $2.10. So essentially, mine versus theirs for the Western Bulldogs to beat Fremantle. You can probably get more on Betfair as well, which is peer-to-peer as opposed to person versus bookmaker. I don't understand how that's not the bet of the season.
Oh, take it.
Truthfully, I don't. And the best part about that is that's exactly the type of thing you can make a no loss, because you can back the Bulldogs now, and then as soon as the Bulldogs start well and Fremantle, slumber through the first 20 minutes, Fremantle's price will go out to about $2.40, $2.50 live during the game. Your bet's on there. This is a pretty perfect example of what I think will be a no-loss wager. I'm not going to back Fremantle, because that would be embarrassing, because they're going to lose anyway. But that's an example of where you could go with a no-loss wager here. But no, the Western Bulldogs, I think, are not a very good side. And I think I've made that fairly clear on this podcast in previous weeks, which is a damning indictment of where Fremantle are. I think the Western Bulldogs have this pretty well covered. They can attack. They can keep teams to around 10 goals and have no functioning forwards. Fremantle this week will have no functioning forwards. I think this is a recipe for disaster. You've got to remember, Liam, it's going to be Tracy and Taberner as the forward targets. I'm going to give you a chance to actually veto your tip here, because I don't think you've actually thought this through.
They're going to win by 6 goals just to confuse everybody, because that's what they do. That's what they do. They confuse everybody, including us. Their loyal fans, which we are very, very loyal fans, almost to a fault. So it's you watch. They'll do something silly and they'll come out and win. We'll after the game, we'll be going on the next edition of Dodgy Punts podcast. We'll be sitting here going, "Well, I don't get it. Either way, if they win, if they lose, I'm still going to be confused." So we'll move on.
I'll be booking my flights live on the podcast. I'll screen share it and everything, so you can all see where I'm going to the grand final.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, go. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, we're gonna burn through Sunday here. This is probably a game worth briefly talking about, though. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock Perth time, 1 p.m. local time for the Queenslanders. It is Gold Coast versus West Coast at the People First Stadium. Now, I get to go first here, much like the people that sponsor this stadium, and I am going to say the Gold Coast, because as hot as West Coast are, and they are absolutely hot, they've played 3 excellent games in a row now against Sydney, against Richmond, and against Fremantle. I do think Gold Coast is a really niche challenge for bottom 6, bottom 8 sides, and it's not always an easy place to win. This Gold Coast team isn't particularly setting the world on fire. In fact, they've had some pretty bad losses this season. They've also had some pretty impressive wins, and a lot of those have coincided with playing at the People First Stadium. So for that reason, while very respectful of West Coast, I'm happy to stick with the devil I know here and just back Gold Coast at home on the basis that more seems to suit them in this type of setup than West Coast. And they have now had to expend a lot of energy, West Coast, with a couple of big home wins. Those type of performances can gas a young side.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of hard to disagree with a lot of the things you've just said. I'm excited to see if the Eagles can take it to Gold Coast, and based on current form, yeah, they can probably win. Part of me wants to tip them, but I also think that the Suns need a bit of a kick up the old cloaca as well, and I think a good win here against the West Coast would be good. So I too am going to tip the Gold Coast Suns as well.
Are you?
I am.
Are you?
Am I not allowed to?
No, you can.
Oh, okay. Then I will.
Just more backflips in a synchronized gymnast at the Olympics. But that's okay. Our last game of the round, we have Hawthorn versus Sydney. We have little to talk about. Liam, who are you tipping?
Sydney. Sydney for sure. Yeah.
You recycled my joke from yesterday. We switched the order.
Yeah, well, I could do it, couldn't I? Did we switch the order? Is that what happened? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sydney. There's not much to talk about here. Sydney.
Yep, Sydney. Pretty comfortable. Cool. That is going to wrap it up. We're going to try to keep these, I think, to about 20, 25 minutes each week. So let's have a bit of fun, talk about the games. Make sure you are following us on YouTube is fine because all our episodes are here, but also Spotify as well if you'd like to have a listen on your commute to work or run or whatever. Make sure you also follow us on Instagram at Dodgy Punts. I'm Jesse. That's Liam. That's Just the Tips. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.